Picture this. You fall from a 50-foot tree branch. Yeah, you're going straight to the hospital with broken bones. But a tiny squirrel? It does this literally every day, hits the dirt, and just scampers off completely unharmed. Why is that? I mean, gravity is pulling both of you down at the exact same rate. So what invisible force is swooping in to save the squirrel's life?
Well, to solve this biological mystery, we need to uncover the physics behind drag force and terminal velocity. By the end of this explainer, you'll know exactly what drag force is, the math behind it, and how to calculate terminal velocity. We're going to cover the falling squirrel paradox, what drag force actually is, the math of drag, reaching terminal velocity, Stokes' law for the micro world, and then wrap it all up with a summary.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the falling squirrel paradox. Way back in 1928, a British biologist named J.B.S. Haldane wrote this famous, kind of visceral observation. He basically said, a rat is killed, a man is broken, and a horse splashes. It's a bit gruesome, sure, but it brilliantly highlights how gravity and air resistance scale so differently depending on an animal's size. For a tiny animal, the resistance to falling is roughly 10 times greater than the downward pull of gravity. But what exactly is that resistance we're talking about? That brings us to part 2, what is drag force? So, formally speaking, drag force is a force that always opposes the motion of an object through a fluid. And remember, in physics, a fluid can be a liquid like water or a gas like the air around us. Think about it like this. Imagine you're riding in a car on the highway. You stick your hand out the window completely flat against the wind. You feel this massive force pushing your arm backward, right? That's drag. But then you tilt your hand so just the thin edge is cutting through the air. Suddenly, that force drops way down. You've just changed the surface area that's facing the wind. The big takeaway here, drag always fights motion, and its strength depends entirely on your shape and size.
Now that we've got the concept down, let's look at part 3, the math of drag. Now, don't let the formula intimidate you. It's actually pretty straightforward when we break it down. For everyday macro objects, the drag force equals 1/2 times c times rho times a times v squared. Okay, let's unpack that. Step 1 is c, the drag coefficient. This is just a number that tells us how aerodynamic an object is. Step 2 is rho, the fluid density. Thicker fluids naturally create more drag. Step 3 is a, the frontal area facing the motion, just like your hand out the car window. And step 4, actually, wait, this is super important. Pay close attention to that v squared. For large objects, drag force is proportional to the square of the velocity. That means if you just double your speed, the drag force doesn't double, it quadruples.
To see how this plays out in the real world, let's look closer at that drag coefficient, c. You can really see how aerodynamics change the game here. Look at an ultra-sleek airfoil. It has a tiny drag coefficient of 0.05. Now compare that to a massive, boxy Hummer H2 SUV sitting at 0.64, or a flat circular plate at 1.12. This is exactly why engineers spend so much time rigorously testing vehicles in wind tunnels. Getting that C value down means the car wastes way less fuel fighting air resistance at high speeds.
And you know, it's not just car designers trying to game this formula. Elite athletes are absolutely obsessed with it. Take Olympic swimmers. To reduce drag, they routinely shave their body hair. Back in 2008, they famously wore these highly specialized full-body compression suits. By smoothing out their surface, they managed to lower their drag coefficient just a tiny fraction. But when you're moving fast, lowering that COF even a little bit slices crucial milliseconds off race times. It literally changes the entire outcome of a race.
Moving on to part 4, reaching terminal velocity. So, you might be wondering what actually happens when this ever-increasing drag force finally gets large enough to perfectly equal the downward pull of gravity.
Well, that is exactly when an object reaches terminal velocity. As something falls, gravity pulls it down. But as it speeds up, remember our formula? That velocity squared means the drag force shoots up exponentially. Eventually, that upward drag perfectly matches the downward pull of gravity. At that precise moment, the net force drops to 0. And based on Newton's second law, 0 net force means 0 acceleration. The object completely stops speeding up and just falls at a constant maximum speed. That right there is terminal velocity.
Let's quickly see how the algebra works out here. Step 1, set the net force to 0, which means mass times gravity, or mg, equals the drag force. Step 2, we substitute our drag formula in, so mg equals 1/2 rho cav squared. Step 3, we just solve for velocity, v. Multiply both sides by 2, divide by the other variables, and take the square root. Boom! Now we have a beautiful, clean formula that tells us exactly how fast something will fall based purely on its mass, area, and fluid density.
Let's actually plug in some real numbers to see this in action. Take an 85-kilogram skydiver falling in a spread eagle position. We know gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared, we know the density of the air, we estimate his frontal area and his drag coefficient. And when we crunch those numbers, we get 44 meters per second. That's about 160 kilometers per hour. That is his absolute maximum falling speed in that specific position.
Now, quick retention check for you. What happens if our skydiver wants to fall faster? Well, they change their shape. The spread eagle skydiver has a really large frontal area, so he maxes out at that 44 meters per second. But if he tucks in and dives head first, pointing straight down to the ground, he shrinks his frontal area drastically. The result? His terminal velocity shoots all the way up to 98 meters per second. That's over 350 kilometers per hour. Minimize the area, and you drastically maximize the speed.
All right, let's shrink things way down to the microscopic level for Part 5, Stokes' Law and the Micro World.
Now, here is where physics throws us a really fascinating curveball. Everything we just talked about with velocity squared, that actually only applies to macro objects, stuff like cars, baseballs, and skydivers. But for micro objects like bacteria, dust, or pollen that are moving super slowly through fluids, the physical rules completely change. For them, drag force is no longer proportional to velocity squared. It's proportional only to velocity, just v.
This linear relationship is what we call Stokes' law. It tells us that for very, very small objects in a viscous fluid, the drag force is simply proportional to the object's radius, the fluid's viscosity, and its velocity. Because the drag is just so incredibly high relative to their microscopic mass, things like bacteria or tiny sediment reach their terminal velocity almost instantly. A single bacterium falling in water might max out at just 2 micrometers per second. At that microscopic scale, swimming through water essentially feels like swimming through thick syrup.
And that brings us to Part 6, our summary.
Let's quickly recap the key points we've covered in this explainer. Number 1, drag force always opposes fluid motion. Number 2, for macro objects, drag depends heavily on velocity squared, meaning if you double your speed, you quadruple the drag. Number 3, terminal velocity happens exactly when the upward drag force matches the downward pull of gravity, dropping net acceleration to absolutely zero. And number 4, in the micro world, Stokes' law takes over, and drag depends linearly on velocity.
And you know, all of this brings us right back to our squirrel. Its tiny mass and relatively large surface area create enough drag to slow it down to a completely safe terminal velocity long before it hits the ground. So I want to leave you with a final thought here. Knowing how strictly drag dictates terminal velocity and energy consumption, how do you think it has shaped the physical evolution of animals in our oceans and skies? Think about the highly streamlined shape of a dolphin, or that classic V formation of migrating geese. It's a huge puzzle, and I invite you to explore more of that biological mystery with me in our next explainer.